Carl Jung discovered something that will completely change how you see that person you could never forget, the one you loved but couldn't be with. According to his decades of research into the human psyche, if you've experienced this specific type of impossible love, you possess what he called a differentiated soul, a psychological rarity that affects less than 8% of the population. But here's what Jung found most fascinating about this pattern. The very trait that makes you capable of this profound, unrequited connection is the same trait that marks you as psychologically advanced beyond the average human experience. Most people love conditionally. They love what serves them, what completes them, what fills their emptiness. But you loved someone knowing it would bring you pain. You chose depth over convenience, truth over comfort, authenticity over possession. Jung would have recognized this immediately as evidence of what he termed transcendent love, a psychological function that operates beyond the ego's survival mechanisms. This isn't about romance gone wrong. This isn't about timing or circumstances or bad luck. This is about your soul recognizing something in another person that your rational mind couldn't understand, something so profound that even impossibility couldn't diminish its power. Jung spent years documenting cases of individuals who experienced what he called archetypal attractions, connections that transcend ordinary relationship dynamics. He found that people capable of loving someone they can't have often possess psychological depths that make conventional relationships feel shallow, incomplete, somehow fraudulent. You've probably wondered why you couldn't just move on, why this person occupied space in your psyche that no one else could fill, why their absence felt more real than other people's presence. The painful truth Jung discovered is that souls like yours are built for a different kind of connection entirely. You don't love to possess or to be completed. You love to witness, to honor, to celebrate another person's existence, even when that celebration must happen from a distance. This capacity for selfless recognition is so rare that most therapeutic approaches completely miss its significance. They try to heal you from something that isn't broken, to cure you of something that's actually evidence of your psychological evolution. But here's where Jung's insight becomes revolutionary. He realized that people who love impossibly often carry what he called the wounded healer archetype. Your capacity to love without possessing, to value without controlling, to honor without claiming. These aren't signs of romantic failure. They're signs of psychological maturity that most people never develop. You've been carrying a gift disguised as a curse, a strength disguised as a weakness, a superpower disguised as a wound. If you've ever loved someone you couldn't be with and still carry them in your heart like a sacred flame that refuses to be extinguished, share in the comments what that person taught you about love itself. Because Jung believed that recognizing this pattern in yourself is the first step toward understanding why your soul operates at frequencies most people will never access. Your impossible love wasn't your mistake. It was your awakening. Jung discovered something remarkable about individuals who fall deeply for someone they cannot have. He called it anima and animus recognition, a psychological phenomenon where your soul encounters its missing half, not in someone available, but in someone who serves as a mirror for your own undeveloped potential. This isn't about bad timing or unfortunate circumstances. This is about your psyche recognizing qualities in another person that you're meant to cultivate within yourself. When you love someone impossible, you're not just loving them. You're loving through them into aspects of yourself that haven't fully emerged yet. Jung found that these connections often occur when your unconscious mind recognizes psychological gold in another person, qualities that resonate with your own latent potential. The person you can't have becomes a living symbol of who you're becoming, which is why releasing them feels like releasing a part of yourself. Think about the qualities that drew you to this person. Their creativity, their depth, their way of seeing the world, their emotional honesty, their courage to be different. Jung would have asked you a crucial question. How many of these qualities were you suppressing in yourself when you met them? The magnetic pull you felt wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. Your soul seeing its own reflection in someone else's authentic expression. This explains why conventional relationship advice fails people like you. Therapists tell you to move on, to find someone available, to be practical about love. But they don't understand that you weren't just seeking a relationship. You were seeking a mirror for your own psychological development. The person you couldn't have was serving as what Jung called a psychological catalyst, someone who activates dormant aspects of your personality simply by being themselves. Jung documented hundreds of cases where impossible love preceded major psychological breakthroughs. The emotional intensity of loving someone you can't have often cracks open psychological defenses that have kept you playing small, staying safe, avoiding your full potential. The pain of impossible love becomes the birthplace of psychological expansion. You're forced to love more purely, to value more deeply, to connect more authentically because all the usual relationship securities are stripped away. But here's what Jung found most profound about this pattern. People who experience impossible love often discover that the love itself was never really about the other person. It was about your soul's recognition of its own capacity for transcendent connection. The person you couldn't have was teaching you that love doesn't require possession, that connection doesn't demand control, that profound recognition can exist even when circumstances make relationship impossible. This realization transforms everything. The pain stops being about loss and becomes about expansion. The longing stops being about them and becomes about your own evolution. The impossible love stops being a wound and becomes a doorway into understanding love as a spiritual practice rather than an emotional transaction. Jung believed that people who learn this lesson become capable of loving in ways that most people never experience. With a purity and depth that comes from loving without agenda, without requirement, without the need for reciprocation. Carl Jung revolutionized psychology when he identified that impossible love often activates what he called archetypal energies, ancient patterns of human experience that exist in our collective unconscious. When you love someone you cannot have, you're not just experiencing personal heartbreak. You're participating in a psychological drama that has played out across cultures and centuries, one that carries profound meaning for your soul's development. Jung discovered that people who experience impossible love often embody what he called the lover archetype in its purest form. Unlike conventional relationships where love becomes transactional, where affection depends on behavior and reciprocation, impossible love strips away all conditions. You love purely because you cannot help but love. This creates what Jung termed unconditional positive regard, a psychological state that most people only achieve after decades of spiritual practice, if at all. But there's something even deeper happening here. Jung found that impossible love often serves as initiation into what he called the transcendent function, the psychological ability to hold paradox without needing to resolve it. You learn to carry love and loss simultaneously, to hold joy and grief in the same heart, to experience connection and separation as two faces of the same coin. This capacity for psychological complexity marks you as someone whose consciousness operates at levels most people never develop. Think about how impossible love changed your relationship with attachment itself. Before this experience, you probably believed love meant possession, that caring required control, that connection demanded certainty. But loving someone impossible taught you that the deepest connections transcend ownership, that the most profound love often exists in spaces between what is and what could be. Jung observed that people who navigate impossible love successfully often develop what he called detached compassion, the ability to care deeply while holding outcomes lightly. This isn't emotional numbing or defensive detachment. This is love evolved beyond neediness, beyond the ego's demand for reciprocation. You learn to love like the sun loves the earth, unconditionally, without requiring anything in return. This psychological achievement is extraordinarily rare. Most people love conditionally because they're using relationships to fill internal voids, to complete missing pieces, to validate their worth. But impossible love forces you to find completeness within yourself, while simultaneously opening your heart more fully than ever before. You become whole while loving wholeheartedly, self-sufficient while remaining deeply connected. Jung believed this paradoxical achievement represents evolutionary consciousness in action. You're not just healing from impossible love. You're developing psychological capacities that prepare you for deeper, more authentic connections in the future. Every person who learns to love without possessing raises the bar for what human relationships can become. The pain you carried wasn't punishment. It was preparation. The longing you felt wasn't weakness. It was your soul stretching into its full capacity. The impossible love wasn't your failure. It was your initiation into understanding love as a spiritual practice that transforms both the lover and the loved, even when they can never be together. But Jung warned about something crucial that most people experiencing impossible love never recognize. There's a shadow side to this pattern that can trap you in cycles of emotional suffering if you don't understand its psychological function. Jung discovered that some individuals become addicted to the intensity of impossible love precisely because it allows them to avoid the vulnerability required for available relationships. Here's what Jung observed in his clinical practice. Some people unconsciously choose impossible love because it feels safer than risking rejection from someone who could actually be with them. The impossibility becomes a protective barrier. You can love fully while knowing you'll never have to face the daily challenges of real intimacy, the moments when your partner sees your flaws, your ordinary humanity, your morning breath and bad moods. Jung called this the romantic inflation shadow. You idealize the impossible person because you never have to deal with their human limitations. They remain perfect in your mind because reality never has a chance to disappoint you. But this psychological pattern can prevent you from ever experiencing the profound growth that comes from authentic, available love, with all its beautiful imperfections. There's another shadow Jung identified in people who repeatedly fall for unavailable partners. Sometimes impossible love becomes a way to avoid your own psychological development. Instead of doing the inner work to become the person capable of healthy relationship, you pour all your emotional energy into longing for someone who can't be with you. The impossible love becomes a distraction from your own evolution. Jung found that people stuck in this shadow often have unresolved attachment wounds from childhood. They unconsciously recreate the dynamic of loving someone who can't fully love them back because it feels familiar. The pain of impossible love mirrors earlier experiences of wanting affection from unavailable parents, creating a psychological comfort zone built around emotional longing rather than satisfaction. But here's where Jung's insight becomes liberating. Recognizing these shadow patterns doesn't diminish the reality of your impossible love. It deepens your understanding of why it occurred and what it's meant to teach you. Jung believed that every psychological pattern, even painful ones, serves the soul's development when approached with awareness. The question Jung would ask you is this: has your impossible love expanded your capacity for authentic connection? Or has it become a way to avoid the risks that come with available love? Has it taught you to love more purely, or has it allowed you to love more safely? Has it deepened your self-understanding, or has it become a distraction from your own growth? If you're feeling called out right now, if you're recognizing that maybe your pattern of impossible love has been protecting you from something scarier than unrequited feelings, comment below and simply say, "I'm ready to love bravely." Because Jung discovered that awareness of these shadow patterns is always the first step toward transformation. Your impossible love served its purpose. Now the question is whether you're ready to let it teach you what it came to teach and move toward the available love your evolved heart is actually seeking. Carl Jung made a profound discovery about people who experience impossible love. Hidden within the pain of loving someone you cannot have are psychological gifts that most people never develop. Jung called these gifts the treasures of the depths, psychological abilities that emerge only when the heart is broken open by experiences that conventional therapy tries to heal rather than understand. The first gift Jung identified is what he called emotional sovereignty. When you love someone impossible, you're forced to find the source of love within yourself rather than depending on reciprocation to feel worthy. You learn that your capacity to love isn't diminished by whether that love is returned. This creates an internal wellspring of affection that becomes independent of external validation. You discover that love is something you are, not something you need to receive. Jung found that people who master this lesson become incredibly attractive to others because they love from fullness rather than emptiness. They don't need relationships to complete them. They enter relationships to share the completeness they've already discovered within themselves. This shift from needy love to generous love transforms every future connection. The second gift is what Jung termed psychological depth. Impossible love forces you to explore emotional territories that most people avoid. You learn to sit with longing without demanding immediate resolution, You develop tolerance for emotional complexity. You discover that you can hold contradictory feelings simultaneously. You can miss someone while being grateful for their absence, love someone while accepting you cannot have them, feel heartbroken while recognizing the beauty in that brokenness. This emotional sophistication prepares you for relationships with depth that most people never experience. You become capable of loving someone's complexity rather than just their convenient aspects. You can appreciate their shadows as well as their light. You can hold space for their contradictions because you've learned to hold your own. The third gift Jung discovered is spiritual maturity. Impossible love often serves as initiation into understanding love as something sacred rather than transactional. You learn to love without agenda, to care without control, to value without possessing. This transforms your entire relationship with attachment. You stop trying to capture love and start allowing yourself to be moved by it. Jung observed that people who develop this gift often become what he called wounded healers. Their experience of loving impossibly gives them profound compassion for others, navigating similar psychological territories. They can offer presence without trying to fix, understanding without judgment, love without conditions. But perhaps the most profound gift Jung identified is what he called soul recognition. Through impossible love, you learn to recognize and value the eternal aspects of another person beyond their role in your life. You see their essence independently of their availability. This capacity for pure recognition becomes a superpower in all your future relationships. You stop loving people for what they give you and start loving them for who they are. These gifts don't eliminate the pain of impossible love, but they transform its meaning. The pain stops being pointless suffering and becomes purposeful initiation. Every tear becomes sacred water, nurturing the growth of psychological capacities most people never develop. Your impossible love wasn't a mistake. It was a masterclass in advanced human loving. Jung made a startling observation about individuals who successfully integrate the experience of impossible love. He found that they undergo what he called psychological alchemy, a process where emotional lead transforms into spiritual gold. The pain that once felt like pure suffering becomes the foundation for a deeper, more authentic way of engaging with love itself. This transformation begins when you stop asking why this happened to you and start asking what this experience is developing within you. Jung discovered that impossible love often activates what he termed the individuation process, the psychological journey toward becoming whole. The longing you feel for another person becomes longing for your own completeness. The love you can't give them becomes love you learn to give yourself. But Jung identified specific stages in this alchemical process. The first stage is what he called the nigredo, the darkness. This is the stage of raw grief, of fighting reality, of believing the pain will never end. Most people get stuck here because they resist the darkness rather than allowing it to teach them. They try to heal quickly, to move on efficiently, to fix what feels broken. Jung understood that this darkness serves a crucial function. It strips away illusions about love that no longer serve you. It forces you to confront your attachment patterns, your need for control, your fear of being truly seen. The pain becomes a cosmic chisel, carving away everything that isn't essential to who you're becoming. The second stage Jung called the albedo, the whitening. This is where clarity begins to emerge from the chaos. You start to see the gifts hidden within your impossible love. You recognize how it expanded your capacity for depth, authenticity, emotional sovereignty. You understand that the person you couldn't have was serving as a mirror for your own potential. The final stage is what Jung termed the rubedo, the reddening. This is where integration happens. You carry forward the gifts of impossible love while releasing the attachment to outcome. You love more deeply than ever before, but with a freedom that comes from loving without agenda. You become someone who can offer profound connection without losing yourself in it. Jung discovered that people who complete this alchemical process become magnetic in ways they never were before. They carry a quality of emotional authenticity that draws others like flames draw moths. But unlike before, they don't lose themselves in connection. They remain sovereign while loving freely. The paradox Jung identified is beautiful. By fully grieving the love you couldn't have, you become capable of love you never imagined possible. By accepting the impossibility, you discover possibilities you never considered. By releasing the specific person, you open to connections more profound than anything you originally sought. If you're recognizing yourself in this process of transformation, if you can feel how your impossible love is alchemizing into something precious within you, take a moment to honor that person who couldn't be yours, but who catalyzed your evolution. Comment below with simply "thank you," because sometimes gratitude is the bridge between pain and transcendence. Carl Jung discovered something extraordinary about people who experience impossible love repeatedly. He found that they often possess what he called soul recognition abilities, a psychological function that operates beyond ordinary attraction mechanisms. These individuals don't just fall in love with personalities or appearances. They recognize archetypal energies, soul signatures, essential qualities that resonate with their own deepest nature. Jung observed that people with soul recognition abilities often experience what he termed fateful encounters, meetings that feel cosmically orchestrated despite being practically impossible. You probably remember the moment you met this person you couldn't have. Something shifted in the atmosphere. Time seemed to slow or accelerate. You felt recognized by someone you'd just encountered, as if they were seeing parts of you that you'd never shown anyone. This isn't fantasy or projection. Jung discovered that certain individuals have highly developed intuitive functions that can perceive psychological depths in others within moments of meeting. You were reading their soul signature, recognizing qualities that matched frequencies within your own unconscious mind. The impossibility of the relationship doesn't diminish the reality of this recognition. If anything, it proves how authentic it was. Your soul recognized something so profound that even circumstances couldn't diminish its power. But Jung identified a crucial pattern in people with these abilities. They often struggle in conventional relationships because most people operate at surface levels that feel inauthentic to someone capable of soul-deep recognition. You probably find most social interactions exhausting, most potential partners somehow disappointing, not because they're inadequate, but because you're seeking connection at depths most people haven't developed. Jung called this the curse of the depth seeker. You can perceive possibilities for profound connection that most people can't even imagine. This makes you simultaneously more capable of extraordinary love and more likely to feel isolated in ordinary relationships. You're seeking someone who can match your level of psychological sophistication, emotional honesty, spiritual depth. The person you couldn't have represented someone operating at your frequency, someone whose soul recognition abilities matched your own. This is why their unavailability felt so tragic. It wasn't just losing a relationship. It was losing confirmation that connection at your level was possible. But Jung discovered something hopeful about this pattern. People who develop soul recognition abilities eventually attract others with similar capacities. Your impossible love was teaching you to recognize the qualities you need in an available partner: the depth, the authenticity, the emotional sophistication, the spiritual maturity. You weren't just falling in love with this specific person. You were falling in love with possibilities for human connection that most people never imagine. Jung believed that individuals with soul recognition abilities serve as evolutionary agents for human relationships. By refusing to settle for surface-level connection, by demanding authenticity even when it means loneliness, you're raising the bar for what intimate partnership can become. Your impossible love wasn't personal failure. It was you recognizing the future of human relating. The qualities that drew you to someone impossible weren't unique to that person. They were qualities your soul is seeking in someone available, someone capable of meeting you at the depths where your real self lives. Jung made a revolutionary discovery about people who successfully integrate impossible love experiences. He found that they develop what he called conscious relationship abilities, psychological skills that allow them to create available connections with the depth and authenticity they experienced in their impossible love. But this requires understanding that your impossible love was preparation, not punishment. The first skill Jung identified is what he termed discernment without cynicism. Your impossible love taught you to recognize depth, authenticity, and emotional sophistication in others. But the shadow of this experience can make you either too guarded or too desperate. Some people become cynical, believing that depth is only found in impossible circumstances. Others become desperate, trying to force depth with anyone who shows interest. Jung discovered that healthy integration means carrying forward the standards impossible love taught you, while remaining open to finding these qualities in available people. You don't need to lower your standards for depth. You need to develop patience for finding depth in accessible forms. The person you couldn't have showed you what's possible. Now your work is recognizing these possibilities when they appear in someone who can actually be with you. The second skill is what Jung called sovereign vulnerability. Impossible love taught you to love from fullness rather than emptiness, to give without needing immediate return. But available relationships require a different kind of courage. You must be willing to be seen completely, to show your ordinary humanity, to risk rejection from someone who could actually be with you if they chose. Jung found that people who master this skill create relationships with extraordinary depth because they bring the emotional sovereignty learned through impossible love into available connections. They love generously while maintaining healthy boundaries. They offer depth while respecting the other person's capacity to receive it. The third skill Jung identified is what he termed realistic idealization. Impossible love often keeps the other person perfect in your mind because you never have to deal with their daily humanity. Available relationships require appreciating someone's essence while accepting their human limitations. You must learn to love someone's potential while accepting their current reality. But Jung discovered something beautiful about people who develop these conscious relationship abilities. They often create partnerships that surpass even their impossible love in terms of actual fulfillment. Because while impossible love teaches you about depth, available love teaches you about integration. You learn to experience profound connection within the context of shared daily life. Jung believed that your impossible love was preparing you for what he called sacred partnership, relationship that serves both people's psychological and spiritual development. You're no longer seeking someone to complete you. You're seeking someone to evolve alongside, someone who can match your capacity for depth while building something real together. The person you couldn't have served as your teacher, they showed you what you're capable of recognizing and creating. Now your work is finding someone available who can meet you at the depths where your impossible love taught you to live. Your standards weren't too high. You just weren't looking in the right places yet. Carl Jung's final insight about impossible love was perhaps his most profound. He discovered that people who experience this psychological pattern are often serving what he called a transpersonal function. Your impossible love wasn't just personal experience. It was preparation for a role you're meant to play in the evolution of human consciousness around love itself. Jung observed that individuals who successfully integrate impossible love experiences often become what he termed love revolutionaries. Not in dramatic ways, but through quiet demonstration of what unconditional recognition looks like. You carry a quality of seeing people's essence that most never develop. You offer presence without agenda, appreciation without possession, love without conditions. This becomes a gift you give to everyone you encounter. Think about how your impossible love changed your relationship with love itself. You probably stopped believing that love requires reciprocation to be real. You learned that profound connection can exist even without relationship. You discovered that recognizing someone's beauty doesn't diminish when they can't return your feelings. These realizations prepare you to love more purely in all your relationships. Jung found that people with these experiences often become unconscious healers for others struggling with attachment wounds. Your friends come to you with relationship problems because you understand both the ecstasy and agony of loving deeply. You can hold space for their contradictory feelings because you've learned to hold your own. You can offer hope without false optimism because you know that love survives even impossible circumstances. But Jung identified something even deeper. He believed that people who experience impossible love are often preparing to help heal collective wounds around love and attachment that our culture carries. We live in a society that teaches people to love conditionally, to attach desperately, to possess rather than appreciate. Your experience of loving impossibly demonstrates a different way. Every time you love without needing to control, you model psychological freedom. Every time you appreciate someone without needing to possess them, you demonstrate mature affection. Every time you recognize someone's essence independent of their role in your life, you practice sacred seeing. These aren't just personal achievements. their contributions to raising the collective consciousness around what love can become. Jung discovered that impossible love often serves as initiation into understanding love as spiritual practice rather than emotional transaction. You learn to love like the divine loves, unconditionally, without agenda, celebrating existence for its own sake. This transforms you into someone who can offer profound healing to others simply through your presence. Your impossible love taught you that the deepest connections transcend circumstance, that recognition is more powerful than possession, that loving someone can be complete even when relationship is impossible. These aren't consolation prizes. These are advanced spiritual teachings that most people never learn. If this resonates with you, if you can feel how your impossible love has been preparing you to love more authentically in all your relationships, I want you to know that your experience matters. Your pain served a purpose. Your love was not wasted. You're not broken from loving someone you couldn't have. You're evolved because of it. Take a moment to share in the comments what your impossible love taught you about love itself. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to understand their own experience. And if this exploration of Jung's insights about impossible love has helped you see your experience in a new light, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to continue this journey into understanding the deeper psychology of human connection. Share this with someone who needs to know that their impossible love wasn't a mistake, but a masterclass in advanced human loving. Thank you for trusting me with 30 minutes of your precious time, and for having the courage to look deeply into experiences that many prefer to avoid. Your willingness to explore the depths of your own heart makes you part of what Jung believed was humanity's evolution toward more conscious, authentic, and transcendent ways of loving. Until our paths cross again in the next exploration of the human soul,